May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please. Probably comes as no surprise to most of you, but Jesus was not afraid to talk about money. It's often noted the topic of money comes up more than any other in the Gospels. If Jesus were teaching today, his parables would probably be populated with CEOs and 401ks and stockbrokers instead of landowners and pearls of great value and merchants. To put today's parable in modern terms, you might imagine the landowner as the wealthy CEO of a venture capital firm. The CEO decides to leave on a vacation for a while, and he really wants to get away. So he plans to go to his island in the Caribbean, and he's made the choice not to bring his phone, to have no internet connection. But of course, he doesn't want to leave his millions of dollars of financial wealth unmanaged, and he likes to have a diversified portfolio. So he decides to appoint not one, but 3 vice presidents to manage his money, at least a portion of it. Yet he also recognizes that each of these vice presidents, of course, they have different gifts. So he gives one $5 million. And to another, he gives $2 million. And to the third, $1 million. Sometime later, the CEO returns after having gotten his tan and his fill of the beach. And he decides it's time to check in. And while that CEO was away, of course, the first vice president and the second, they had made some pretty good investments. And by doing so, they'd managed to double his wealth. But the third was so afraid of angering his boss, he decided to just put the money in a safe. At least then, he thought, he could ensure that he would be able to return every dollar. As you might have guessed, the CEO was thrilled to find what the first and second vice presidents had done. But he was infuriated with the third. After all, why wouldn't he have just at least put it in an interest-bearing account? At the very least, there were incredibly safe ways to invest that $1 million after all. But that third vice president, he saw the CEO was someone who was harsh and vengeful, and so out of fear, he chose not to act. And as a result, the CEO fired the third vice president, threw him out, took away his stock options, took away his company car, and then gave all his accounts to the first vice president. And thus ends the parable of the venture capitalist, CEO, and his vice presidents. I think when we shift the language into a modern idiom, a few things become more obvious. First of all, the sum of money involved is significant. It's hard to say exactly how much a talent is, but one fairly common way people talk about it, an estimate they give, is it's worth roughly 6,000 days of labor. That's about 15 years worth of income. In modern-day financial terms, $1 million is a pretty fair approximation of that. This is a large sum of money to entrust to someone, especially without any particular strings. Here, use it, invest it for me. And then not only are we talking about a significant amount of money, the return on the investment produced was pretty remarkable, at least by 2 of the 3. They managed to double the money they started with. We don't know exactly how long the CEO was gone, but it's clear from the context that this doubling of money was viewed as a remarkable accomplishment. But it's here I also have to wonder something. How would that CEO have reacted if either of those first 2 servants had lost his money? Would the CEO have still embraced them for their bold investment strategies? Would they still have gotten to enter into his joy? Or would they have then been condemned? Because they still wouldn't have been putting it into a safe, right? They would have been trying to do something with it. I think as a savvy investor, the CEO must have known that his vice president's doubling his money, it would have meant they would have had to take some real risks with it at times. And yet the CEO doesn't seem fazed by this at all. In the end, I think this is because the parable is implying that the CEO's pleasure with the first 2 and his displeasure with the third, it isn't primarily in the end about the financial outcomes. After all, think about it. The CEO never compares the outcomes. He never says to the third, you didn't double it like the first two. And when it comes down to it, the CEO says, if you just put it in an interest-bearing account, at least that would have been okay. No, the CEO didn't ask them each to return 8% annually. He didn't expect them to double his money, but he expected them to do something with it in good faith. But this third vice president was so afraid of losing the CEO's money, he couldn't take the risk of losing a single dollar. It isn't that he was negligent or selfish. He was just paralyzed by fear. So he decided to play it safe. And yet, ironically, right, it's playing it safe that caused him to lose out. And while Jesus does talk a lot about money, I think in the end, this parable isn't really about money, at least not only about money. Because how we use and invest our money is a reflection of a much deeper matter. It's a reflection of what we value, and yes, who we are. Let's not forget the context in which this parable is being told. It's situated in a larger conversation about what it means to lead a life worthy of God in the time between Jesus' death and resurrection and His second coming. And as God's beloved creations, in the midst of this time, we have been entrusted with something of incredible value, our very lives. And like last week's parable about the bridesmaids, I think this parable is meant to be a reminder of our own agency in this time. We have a choice about how to invest what we've been given. And this parable is an encouragement to seize the day by not letting our lives be ruled by fear. As one author puts it, through this parable, Jesus invites us to be His disciples, to live our lives as fully as possible by investing them, by risking, by expanding the horizons of our responsibilities. Yes, to be Jesus' man or woman is not so much about believing ideas about Him as it is about following Him. It's to experience the renewed responsibility for the use and investment of these precious lives of ours. It's to be bold and brave, to reach high, and yes, to care deeply. But which brings us to that point we should come to each and every week. So what? So what does this mean for my life and my week? I think it means taking the time to appreciate a first snowfall like we've had this morning. I think it means speaking up when we see someone being bullied. I think it means choosing not to ignore the homeless on the streets. I think it means giving what we can to those in need. I think it means smiling at people for no reason, but not in that creepy way, okay? I think it means putting away our phones and devices so we can spend quality time with those we love. Don't ask my wife if I have a problem with this. It means forgiving those who hurt us. It means sitting with our friends when they cry. It means celebrating with our friends when something good happens. And the list goes on, and I know you could each add to it. My point, of course, is that what it means to invest our lives well isn't a matter of a single decision. It's a matter of a lifetime of small choices made in seemingly inconsequential moments. That's where our investment happens. That's where we double our returns. And so in the midst of those everyday moments, in the twists and turns of our lives, may we fearlessly go where God is in fact leading. And may we invest our lives with wisdom, compassion, and yes, boldness. That in the end, we will all have the kind of abundant life that God truly dreams for us and all of His creation. Amen.